well-informed expert people, right, talking about their research and talking about what their institutions are doing. Of all the people talking at you today, I'm definitely the least qualified, right? I'm not an expert. I'm a grad student right now. I just finished my first semester up at SUNY ESF. But before I went to grad school, I was a member of Philly Thrive. I still am. And one of the things I did for Philly Thrive was research. But again, it's research from not from a like in my lab with my students, but a kind of like I'm on a laptop, I'm trying to find out what I can find out. And the reality is there's a lot that you can find out. There's a lot of information out there that everyone in this room could find, right? You don't actually have to be an expert to begin to answer some really important questions that relate to your health and your family's health. So I found a couple of tools along the way. I'm just going to share some of them with you. And actually, a lot of them are redundant. They've already been brought up today, which is great. It means that like we're going to get several exposures to these things. I'll blow through the ones that you've already heard. But right, so the Philly Thrive campaign is we're fighting for our right to breathe. But the other right that we all have is the right to know. We have the right to know information that's relevant to us. And we can use our right to know to support our right to breathe. All right, so I'm going to start with a really simple question, which we've already talked about today. How is the air quality today, right? Say that I have asthma, and I want to go jogging, but like, if it's a bad air quality day, today's not a good day to do that. Or, you know, if I want to reenact the Rocky thing and run up the art museum steps, like, I need to know, like, how's the air quality today? So this site has already come up again. Oh, by the way, again, like I said earlier, if your email is on our sign-in sheet, you're going to be getting an email from me. Don't block me or spam me. And it's going to have a bunch of information, all these tools that I'm talking about plus some. So airnow.gov, super useful, super easy. You go to the site, and it's like, you know, first you see all of the US, but you can type in your local situation. Here we are in Philly. This is last Wednesday. Wednesday wasn't such a great day. It's not a terrible day, right? We're yellow. We're not orange or red. But, you know, so if you are sensitive, if you're a sensitive person, maybe reconsider the, like, retiling you were going to do of some, like, I don't know, backyard or something. Save that for a day when it's green. And so this is just one tiny way, right, where you can take ownership over your health. You can take ownership over your life a little bit. And, you know, use information to help you live healthier. The other thing that's really cool, right, so that's the AQI, the air quality index, that's today, that's real time. But what about yesterday's? Or what about last month? Or what about last year's, right? So air data, which is run by the EPA. The EPA is incredible. I mean, most of the tools I'm talking about today are from the EPA. The fact that their budgets are getting cut is heartbreaking to me because there's incredible work happening over there. So air data takes all that AQI information, but it has catalogs of it. So it's like, so I just wrote in a random thing. I was like, what does the air quality look like in this region over the last 10 years? To this point of like, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? Like, what's the deal? So super overwhelming. Don't get scared. Each row represents a year, right? Top row is 2007. The next row is 2008, etc. Each little vertical tick represents a day, and the color of the tick represents the quality that day. So, right, so some immediate impressions is a whole lot of yellow, right? So we're living in a region that, like, on average is fairly yellow, which is, like, again, not super dangerous. You stay in your basement and hide, but it's also not great, right? So we know that. We've been talking about that all day. But something that struck me when I was looking at this, so look up in like the summer of 2007. Like, we see a bunch of red. We see a couple purple, which is like, if it's a purple day, like, that is a hide in your basement kind of day, I think. You know, but we haven't had as many of those lately. And in fact, in the last couple of years, even the number of red days has gone down. In 2017, and I don't know how reliable this data is, like Professor DeCarlo would, right, this tension between like monitors versus these kind of aggregate things. But what it looks like so far is a pretty green year. So like, not at all to discount the broader message of the day, which is that like there's a lot of air pollution problems in Philly, but on a large scale, like what this tool lets you do is it lets you put today in context. And like, I didn't know that. This is super useful. So air data, another useful resource. AMS, we've already heard about. So I just encourage you to go to their website. There's a ton of useful things. This thing about like, yo, I'm smelling something really nasty right now. What is it, right? Like, that's useful. And you can also see, right, so if I'm going to set up a facility in Philadelphia and it's going to be producing air pollution, I have to get a permit for that. You can't just do that. You know, there's rules about that. And that permitting process is public. So you can see them, you can go see them. It's like, who's applying for air permits? Who, in a city that already has so much air pollution, who is trying to add more? Like, that's a useful question to know the answer to, right? And it's there, you have to see those things. And there's public meetings and notices that are open to anybody. So one thing that I noticed, this is just coincidental, there's something called the Air Pollution Control Board, They have a meeting tomorrow. So if you guys are free from 2 to 4 tomorrow at the Municipal Services Building, you can go, and this is a group that they give advice to the city about air pollution. And it's open to the public. You can go and listen. Peter DeCarlo, I saw that from their minutes from the last meeting, you were there, right?
I've given 2 presentations.
Given a couple so like, that's random. I had never even met him before, but I was like, oh, like. So the point is, a lot of this information is public facing, right? Maybe not enough of it. Maybe there's more that we would like to know, but a lot of it is already there. If you start asking the right questions, and you spend some time at a computer, you can find a lot of stuff. Okay. Another question, right? So it's like the air quality it's like a yellow day. It's been a yellow day all week. Like, what's the deal? Where is this coming from? And we've talked about this too, so I'm going to go quick through it. But the TRI is a really amazing inventory. And it's based on this principle that is sort of at the heart of my whole spiel today, which is that you have the right to know, and once you know, that is a basis to act. And so if you're a researcher, now I know where I should focus my research. If you're a regulator, now I know, like, that's the low-lying fruit. Like, they're the ones doing a real bad job, like, let's target them first. If you're an activist and you're trying to sort of wield people power to make changes in your community, like, anyway, these are useful things to know. But like we've been talking about, the EPA keeps track of a ton of different toxic chemicals, over 600 of them. And yeah, so there's this inventory basically. So you can look up, so this is the shot of Philadelphia. If you go to the TRI website, which again, you guys will get, there's all kinds of information you can learn. So in Philly, there are 29 facilities, or at least as of 2015, there were 29 facilities that had to report to the EPA because they pollute. And so you can say like, all right, well, what are the top 5? This is not news to anybody today. We've been talking about it all day, but look, PES, not only is it number 1, but it's number 1 by like so much. Like the second place is like less than half as bad. So now I'm curious, right? I'd never heard of PES before maybe, so I click on that. There's a whole page about it. There's tons of information. And there's information about how much they've been polluting year to year. So, super interesting, super cool. There's a limit to the utility of TRI for regular folks. If you're not a chemist, you know, it's useful maybe to know that there's 40,000 pounds of sodium cyanide in the air now as a result of this thing. And it's like, cool, that doesn't sound good, but I don't necessarily know very much about that. So there's another tool that you guys should definitely bookmark. This one answers the question, how worried should I be, basically, right? So it's one thing to say, and Professor DeCarlo talked about this, like, it's one thing to know how much was released, but how concentrated is it? How bad is it for me, right? So there's another tool called the Risk Screening Environmental Indicators Model. Call it RISI, not to be confused with Reese's. RISI takes that TRI data, but they combine it with other really useful information. So toxicity data, census data, geographical data, and they wrap it all into what they call a RISI score. And the RISI score, it's not a number that has any kind of unit. All right, so this is a useful way to think about it. Every facility gets a RISI score, and what the scores let you do is compare them. So say that you have 2 facilities, they're identical. They produce the exact same amount of pollution. One is located downtown Philadelphia. The other is located in the middle of nowhere. The one in Philly gets a higher RISI score. Same pollutants, but more exposure to people, right? That's the idea. And you know, there's a caveat. This data is not, it's not foolproof, it's not airtight. They make a couple simplifying assumptions. Take it all with a grain of salt, but it's a great place to begin. So you go to RISI.com, you type in Philadelphia Energy Solutions, you click on it. This blew my mind. All right, look at this graph. So I'll walk you through these. This is 5 years, right? 2011 through 2015. The blue bar represents PES's RISI score. Again, the RISI score for 2011 was 1,174,350. The industry average, so in the petroleum refining industry, the average of facilities nationwide, 154. And so when you look at the graph alone and you don't read the y-axis, it looks, you know, the blue bar is like really big, right? It's way bigger than the other ones, but it's even worse than it looks because that's a log scale. Each line is up by a power of 10, so it's not 5 times worse, it's 10,000 times worse. Which, like, it's just useful to put a number on this, right? So if you live in Wilson and you know the PES is stinky, you know that it's dangerous, that subjective experience is completely valid, completely legitimate. But if you take that to a policymaker, you take that to your council person, not that Kenyatta Johnson doesn't know, but you take it to these people and they might say like, yeah, well, I'm sorry you had like a smelly day, but like, show me the numbers, right? Like how often have we encountered this thing of like, where's your data? And RISI has this data, and it's a starting point, but it's a powerful starting point. There's one, I've got another tool that I'm really excited to talk about, so I want to make sure I have time for it. EJ Screen. The EJ, right, stands for environmental justice, and this has been on the margins all day. We haven't really like engaged it full force, but environmental justice is at the heart of what Philly Thrive is about, because the reality is these emissions don't land on bodies equally. They land on some bodies more than others, and those bodies tend to be low-income people of color, and like that tends to be the case. And so like this principle that all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, income, they all deserve equal treatment and meaningful involvement in these environmental laws and policies. That is aspirational. It is not where we live. And EJ Screen is this really cool mapping tool that lets you explore just how far away from that ideal we are. I don't want to get into how it all works, but basically it's a mapping tool. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through a search that I did. So you start in Philadelphia, zoom in on South Philly. You can draw little boundaries. You can kind of like define regions that you're interested in. So I drew a little map around PES. I don't think I got quite those boundaries right. It's got a weird little top hat that it doesn't actually have. But so PES, I added a little buffer. These are very easy to do. It's just you click on a couple things. And now I can ask questions about who lives in that region, just that region. And in particular, what is their EJ index for all these different parameters? And like, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but basically the higher those bars are, the more, I should have explained what an EJ index is. Basically, it's like, say that you have two neighborhoods. They have the exact same exposure to environmental pollution. But one neighborhood is predominantly white, the other neighborhood is predominantly people of color. That second neighborhood would have a higher EJ index. Now say that you have two other neighborhoods, same demographics, right? Same proportion of people of color, white people, young people, old people, all of that. But one of them is closer to a pollutant source. That one would have a higher EJ index. And the highest EJ indexes are for neighborhoods where there's predominantly people of color or lower income and are exposed to environmental pollution. So, and if these bars are high, it means the index is high. So what I'm saying, what this image tells you is that if you live in this region, if you're one of the sort of 24,000 people or something that fall just in that neighborhood or in that region, you're living in the 95th percentile or higher compared to people across this country. And so when I first looked at this, my jaw dropped. But then I was like, isn't that just all of Philly? Like maybe that's all of Philly? Like, I love Philly, but it's a little grimy. So to test that, right? Because you can just test any question you can think of. You can try to find answers to. So I dropped a pin right at City Hall, drew a little boundary around that, a little half-mile buffer. So I wanted to see what are the EJ indexes there. So we don't have to understand what all each one of these is, but that graph looks a lot different from that graph. So sometimes we feel like our politicians live in a different city than we do, and in many ways they literally do, right? So again, like all of these scores and things are a starting off point. They're not the end of the story, but this is a way of finding out like who lives in your city, who's being affected. Another cool thing about EJ Screen before I move on, there's a tool where you can put two maps side by side and have them show you different kinds of things, different demographic or environmental things. And you can look at how those two features relate to each other. So this one also blew my mind. So this is complicated. Same image of Philly. The one on the left, that's per capita income. The darker the green, the more green they have, right? The other one is minority population. The whiter it is, the whiter it is. So like, who wants to hazard an observation? What do we see?
They're opposite.
They're opposite, right? These overlap. Per capita income and whiteness, essentially, non-minorityness, they go together, they trend together. Which we knew that, but it's crazy and stark to see it there. And again, there are limitations with these tools. These aren't like the end-all be-all, but like, it's a place to start figuring out like what's going on. So I definitely encourage you to play around with EJ Screen for as long as we've got it, because the whole Department of Environmental Justice at the EPA is on the chopping block right now if Trump gets his budget through. All right, so I'm going to change tacks a little bit, and I know I'm running low on time, so I might end here. I want to, the question, especially within activism circles, always comes to like, where is the power, right? And one way of asking that, a different way of asking that, is who is benefiting from the status quo? Because we have a lot of information today on who's not benefiting, right? low-income folks, people of color, small children, if you live near the refinery, like if you're in any of those groups, like Philly is not doing so well by you in terms of air quality. But there are people who are benefiting, right? And like knowing the answer to that gets us a lot further to sort of dismantling the systems that are making people sick. And so this is a tool that I just learned about recently that I think is really sweet. So it's called Little Sis. Anyone here familiar with Little Sis? Yeah, okay. So they call it the involuntary Facebook of the 1%, which I think is a kind of good title. It's basically a wiki, like Wikipedia. It's edited by its users, and it has a page for every person or corporation of interest, right? And then there's these amazing maps that show you relationships between things. So for instance, here's the PES's page. And it has so much information. Who owns it? Who's on the leadership? Who gave them money? Who do they give money to? Who's on their board? Like, what other companies are affiliated with them? Like 1 degree away, 2 degrees away, 3 degrees away. And what you start finding are really, really interesting connections. So, and this relates to a campaign of ours that I think Alexa and Brunel are going to talk about in a bit, so I'm not going to steal their thunder, but back last year, there was a big campaign, the Southport campaign. We were trying to figure out, or PES was trying to build an import-export terminal at a region of the Navy Yard that the city was interested in investing. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but so what Little Sis teaches you, what Little Sis makes available to you are these connections, right? So Tom Wolf, the governor, he is in charge of appointing the board that makes the decision, gives the thumbs up or thumbs down on the different proposals coming in about this property. Tom Wolf is a busy guy. He's got 1,000 decisions to make, so he listens to advisors around him in terms of, that's why political leaders have, secretaries of this or that to help advise them. David Sweet is Tom Wolf's top energy advisor. So on all questions of energy, Tom Wolf gives David Sweet a call and is like, hey, what do you think about this? What should I do about this? David Sweet used to be a lobbyist for PES. Which, it just smacks to me of a conflict of interest a bit, right? So if PES is up for the bid, they're like, hey, Governor Wolf, we want this thing. Governor Wolf is like, what do you think, David Sweet? And David Sweet's like, I think it's a good idea. That's fine. Again, this is a caricature, but what Little Sis lets you do is it lets you see these connections, and I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't even have known to ask, who is Tom Wolf's energy advisor? It doesn't occur to me, but tools like this, make these things available. So the name, by the way, it's the opposite of Big Brother. If Big Brother is the powerful looking down on you, Little Sis is us looking back at you. So anyway, that information and more information, I'm going to be emailing it out. But the message is, the takeaway is you have power. There is information out there that you can get. You don't have to have a degree. It helps. But you can sit down at a coffee shop tomorrow and start learning stuff that matters to you.